Hey, and welcome to this video tutorial. Today I want to walk you through the 6 levels of chord playing. Chords are not just the building blocks of songs, they can also teach you a lot about music theory while you're learning them, improve your finger dexterity, and help you develop your own style. So let's jump straight into level 1. Level 1 covers our basic chords, sometimes also called open chords, cowboy chords, or a bit dismissively, zombie chords. There are 8 of them. C major, D major, and D minor, E major and E minor, G major, A major, and A minor. With these chords, you can already play a huge number of songs and start writing your own. Because each of these chords includes several open strings, they have a very balanced frequency spectrum and sound nice and open. That's exactly why they don't really deserve the name zombie chords. Even highly professional and experienced session and studio guitarists like Tim Pierce swear by these chords and often prefer them over bar chords, for instance. The great thing about these chords is that you can transpose them into any keys using a capo and still sound great with down tunings or even up tunings. Here are a few additional tips from me for working with these chords. Number 1. When learning these chords, always try to fret them from the lowest string upward if you're not able to place all your fingers at once. Since we usually strum or pick from the low strings to the high strings, this gives you a bit more time to complete the upper notes, which can speed up your learning curve. Number 2, get used to placing your thumb over the neck early on. That way you can mute the low strings when needed, and later on you can even use your thumb to fret notes for some chords in the next level. Number 3, make sure to synchronize both hands when playing these chords with different rhythms. For example, if your last 8th note or 16th note in a pattern is an upstroke, it can help to lift your fingers off the fretboard at that moment to create a smooth and clean transition. If you'd like to learn more about that and practice a few exercises, I recommend this video of mine. It's linked here above and in the description. Number 4, if you want to prepare for the next levels and improve your understanding of music theory, start memorizing the notes that make up these chords. The word chord basically means a triad, 3 notes. The root note, which gives the chord its name, the minor third and minor chords, or the major third and major chords, and the 5th. Since we play chords on an instrument with 6 or more strings, some of these notes appear multiple times. Understanding and being able to name them will give you a great overview of the first 3 frets of your guitar. Now let's move on to level 2. At this level, our basic chords are expanded with additional notes, or more precisely intervals. Here we encounter our first dominant 7th chords, our first sus2 and sus4 chords, and also so-called slash chords. They're not named after our favorite top-headed guitarist, but because the note added below the root in the bass is written after a slash in the chord name. Let's start with dominant 7th chords. In these, the 3 standard notes, root, 3rd, and 5th, are extended by adding a minor 7th. Examples include C7, D7, and D minor 7, E7, E minor 7, G7, A7, A minor 7, and also B7. A dominant 7th chord gives the music a tense, bluesy, or slightly restless character. These chords naturally want to resolve back to the tonic chord. That means when you play one of these chords, the tension resolves when you move to the root, the one chord of the key. Of course, for that you need to understand how to harmonize a scale, something we'll cover starting at level 4. But even with little knowledge of music theory, you can and should experiment with these chords until you find something that sounds good or interesting. The Beatles, still considered some of the greatest songwriters of all time, often admitted they didn't know much theory, yet they were already using these chords in their early songs with very interesting results. Examples of sus2 and sus4 chords at this level include E sus4, A sus2, A sus4, D sus2, and D sus4. Sus2 means we replace the minor or major third with a suspended second. The note one whole step above the root. Sus4 means we replace the third with a suspended fourth. The note 3 whole steps above the root. A suspended second chord gives music an airy, open and ambiguous character. By replacing the third, which defines whether a chord is major or minor, with the second degree of the scale, the chord loses its quote-unquote happy or sad quality and creates a modern, hopeful, sometimes mysterious sound. It often feels unresolved, adding emotional depth or gentle tension. A suspended fourth chord creates a sense of tension and anticipation. Replacing the third with a perfect fourth gives the feeling of suspension, as if the chord is holding its breath and waiting to resolve. It's often described as yearning or charged with tension. When you resolve that note back to the third, it creates a very pleasing sound. Next, let's look at some add 9 chords. Easy examples include C add 9, E add 9, and E minor add 9. Adding a ninth to a chord gives a standard triad, major or minor, a lush, refined and open sound. Instead of the simple clarity of a triad, the ninth adds a layer of harmonic richness and color without the strong tension of a seventh chord. Examples of your first slash chords would be D with F sharp in the bass, C over G or C with G in the bass, and A minor over G or A minor with G in the bass. Later, when you know more about intervals and the notes within your scales, you can start freely adding different bass notes to your open chords. Now we move on to level 3. At this level, we focus exclusively on power chords and their variations. I've intentionally placed these relatively easy chords here because based on my experience teaching hundreds of guitar students, they are the best preparation for the more difficult bar chords. There are a few reasons for that. Your hand position, especially what your thumb and wrist are doing, changes compared to most chords from the first two levels. Now you place your thumb behind the neck and push your wrist forward. Exceptions are the simple E and A5 chords, which can be played with just one finger. Another reason is that a properly played power chord represents about half of a bar chord. So you can get used to this new way of playing without needing as much strength as full bar chords require later. The final reason is that by now you should definitely start learning the notes on the low E and A strings, so you always know exactly where a given power chord is located. Here are my tips for this level. Number 1, at first pick through your power chord slowly with a pick. This ensures you're fretting them cleanly. If a note doesn't ring out properly, adjust your hand until it does. Over time, your fingers will memorize the correct position. Number 2, don't play these chords only with distortion. Distortion can mask mistakes and make it harder to notice if your playing isn't clean yet. Number 3, start combining power chords with open chords early on so you learn to switch smoothly between different wrist positions. This will really help you in level 4. Number 4, unlike switching between open chords, your fretting hand usually stays in contact with the fretboard during power chord and bar chord changes. With slower rhythms, you can still play the last accent before the change with the chord. With faster changes, the last note is often muted because your fingers are sliding, and at higher tempos, listeners usually won't even notice. This technique also works great for percussive hits. So here I'm always playing the final upstroke with the same chord before changing. And for this faster rhythm, I play the final upstrokes muted. This sounds even better when you're playing with distortion. Now we've reached level 4. It's finally time to tackle bar chords. To simplify things, most common bar chords are just movable versions of E major, E minor, A major, and A minor shapes. Imagine playing these open chords in a way that leaves your index finger free. Now move these shapes up the neck. Your open strings move with you, and your index finger replaces the nut, pressing all the strings on 1 or 2 frets behind your other fingers. Since you already learned the correct hand position in level 3, now you just need to build enough strength and coordination in your index finger to press down all the strings at once. This is where many beginners hit a major obstacle. Since everyone's hands are slightly different anatomically, there is no single perfect solution. What helped me most were picking exercises, making tiny adjustments to my hand position, and above all, patience and consistency. I've seen many guitarists ignore clean fretting while learning bar chords. That's a habit that's very hard to fix later. So it's much better to take your time and learn them properly from the start. Here are a few more tips. If you already know the notes on the low E and A strings, then as soon as you can play all 4 main bar chord shapes, start learning your scales as chords using bar chords. This will massively improve your songwriting, your understanding of music theory, and your personal style. When you understand how to harmonize a scale and how each degree functions, you can quickly write songs that stand out. While learning scales as chords, you'll also encounter this chord, the diminished chord. It appears as the 7th degree of a major scale and the 2nd degree of a minor scale. At first, many players avoid it because of its unstable sound. But with experience, it becomes a powerful tool for more exotic ideas. Level 5 is similar to the step from level 1 to level 2. Now you learn to harmonize scales using 4-note chords. But instead of just adding a minor 7th, you'll sometimes add a major 7th depending on the scale. This becomes easy to understand once you've practiced chord-scale relationships. You just need to check whether there's a half step or a whole step below the root note of your chord that determines whether you add a major or a minor 7th. So since before C, we have a half step, with a B, we'll just replace the note C here on the G string with a B. And since before D minor, we have a C, we'll replace this D on the G string with the note C. This way of harmonizing sounds more sophisticated than simple triads. It's perfect for percussive fingerstyle and chill lounge-style chord progressions, especially when combined with percussive elements. One of the most important guitar lessons I ever had over 20 years ago was when my teacher showed me all the inversions of these chords across the fretboard. As I learned them, they took my funk, fingerstyle and blues playing to a whole new level. To really understand and combine all these chords in any key, you should invest at least a year practicing them, ideally 15 to 30 minutes a day. Now we arrive at level 6. At this point, you already know a lot about chords, intervals and harmony, especially if you've also studied lead guitar. Now you'll encounter chords with extensions like 6th, 9th, 11th and 13th. Many players come across exotic chords earlier, like the famous Hendrix chord, a 7-sharp-9 chord, but don't analyze them deeply. At this level, it makes sense to explore styles like bossa nova and early jazz standards if you want to learn more about these chords. Personally, I've often drawn inspiration from those styles without studying them deeply. If I liked a chord, I used it in my own progressive rock songs. For example, in my song Time and Time Again, I used bossa nova style chords in a rock context.
And so it's come to this, it's over after all, and broken away the only pain.
But I always analyzed why these chords worked, what function the added intervals had. That helped me create my own chords and find exactly what I needed musically. I also remember an interview with Joe Satriani where he talked about studying with Joe Pass. Pass gave him a book full of exotic chords, but told him the goal wasn't to memorize all of them, it was to pick the chords that resonated with him and use them in his own style. That's exactly how you should approach this level. When you find a chord you like, learn it and use it. Exotic chords are also a great way to spice up common progressions. A good example is Always With Me, Always With You. The progression itself is very simple, just a 1-4-5. But Satriani's use of chords like V at 4, E major 13, and F sharp sus4 makes the song unique through their voicings. And that's it for this video. I hope I was able to give you a great overview of chord playing. If you'd like to learn more about any of these levels, let me know in the comments. I'd also appreciate your likes and new subscriptions. I'll see you again in the next video. Until then, bye.